Hello and welcome back to the IVF Daddies podcast. Today we have an amazing friend of mine whose family building journey has incredible similarities to mine, which we were just discussing, but we'll talk about those now on the podcast. Damien, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Richard. Lovely to see you.
It's so good to have you on the podcast today. Similarities. So we've got multiple friends in common, which we discovered after knowing each other for quite a long time.
Yes.
Tell me about your family and how that was made.
Yeah, I'll try and keep a long story short. Yes, I had always wanted to be a dad, and I knew that surrogacy was going to be a pretty expensive undertaking. So I think I set my mind to trying to be as successful as possible and to be able to afford that journey. And when the time came, I had a couple of businesses, successful exits in Australia. And so I pulled the trigger. And it was coincidentally at that time that I read your book. And as I was reading the book, I was discovering that, I went with the same agency that you'd done your journey with. And then also my surrogate was from the same state as yours. And so, there were a lot of similarities in your book. And I think, it was lovely a few minutes ago to go through our original correspondence, which you had no recollection, of course. My journey was a long one. I'm now 51. It took me a long time to get to to become a dad. I think also because I tried the sort of more affordable destinations first. I got caught up in the whole India saga. India banned foreigners from doing surrogacy. Thank goodness I hadn't paid any money, but I had signed with an agency there and was happy because there were quite a lot of professionals doing surrogacy in India at the time, a lot of Australians as well. Anyway, that failed. And then I regrouped and then went down the Thailand route. And as everyone knows, that closed their doors also to foreigners. So my journey was a long one. And then I bit the bullet because America is definitely more affordable. And I'm really grateful that I did go down the American route in the end. It definitely was the more safe and secure route for surrogacy. Yeah, my beautiful son Nathaniel was born in 2018.
Yeah, he's 6, isn't he?
He's 6 next month, yeah. So
it's crazy how time flies.
Absolutely.
I remember having that first conversation with you, going, "I've got your book." I was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that's it." And this is actually one of the things I did want to talk to you about, because you now run a very successful agency here in the US, and we'll touch upon that in a little bit. But as an Australian, it's very difficult to go through surrogacy in Australia. Can you explain a little bit why doing it at home is a bit tough, and then why looking at it abroad is hard too?
Yeah, so I'll look to answer the first question. I think it's tough in Australia because there's a supply and demand issue, even though we have that same issue here in the States. In Australia, it's altruistic surrogacy, where the surrogate cannot be compensated at all. That doesn't mean it's not an expensive undertaking. You still have to pay for everything else. But it's also against the law in 2 states and a territory. So in Queensland and New South Wales and the ACT, it's actually illegal for a resident of those states and territory to even enter into an international commercial surrogacy arrangement. And it's unfortunate because it's not as if there's a lot of legislation around this. No, when they were legislating for altruistic surrogacy, those states that I just mentioned just added a clause. And I think the concept is that if our residents are not allowed to engage in commercial surrogacy domestically here in Australia, then they should not be allowed to go overseas. So they added one paragraph, which has really had a profound effect on the intended parents that we serve in those states, of course, because they're paranoid. But the great thing is there's no case law. It's like it was illegal to be gay in Tasmania, one of the Australian states in the 90s. Even when I came out, it was still illegal. So it was just one of those, it's one of the laws that really needs to obviously be changed.
And be brought up to date, a little bit like England have done with changing the single parent. You couldn't be recognized as a parent if you're a single dad,
yes.
Right? The law hasn't caught up with what is actually happening, and that's what's happening
absolutely.
In Australia.
And look, it's tough because on the one hand, it would take a case. That would be the quickest way to change the legislation, I think. That if somebody did get actually prosecuted for that, then of course there'd be an uproar, and we know that wouldn't happen. But yeah, I think it takes a lot longer to advocate for change as opposed to having a case to bring about that change. So
yeah,
a long way to go. We're still a little bit behind in Australia.
We actually, Julio and I did a great podcast with some friends of ours, Dan and Garrett, who are the Modern Gays. They do the Modern Gays podcast. They're amazing. I love them. And we touched a little bit on that because I think one of their biggest fears is exactly that. It's like, how, if I go through this in the United States, what's going to happen to me? And it's like, how I've never understood how you can legislate against somebody doing something in a different country where it's legal to do that in that
that's
country.
A very good point. Yeah.
So it's like, that's weird. So I think coming to the States, when both of our children were born in Arizona, both of mine, and you're both all born in Phoenix, which is amazing. And I think a lot of that protection is what we see the people like the US for.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
A lot of people I've spoken to in Australia are looking at other territories still. So we've recently had a bit of an issue where people were going to Greece, and there was a clinic in Greece that they were working with that basically got raided by the police, and those embryos got impounded. How have you seen that impacting what you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. I think that anytime there is any kind of negative story that arises, and let's face it, the media these days are not interested in the success stories of surrogacy, which is a real shame because, as we know, most of the stories are successful, like the vast majority of them are. But yeah, this significantly impacts the trust within the community in Australia as well. And I think with the economy the way it is, people are always naturally going to try and seek a more affordable alternative. And so when these things happen, like Greece, it's just a shame. It really does. It scares people and it frightens people. And we've got quite a few clients that came out of Greece and have come to us at NewGen Families, and their stories, it's horrific, honestly. It is really horrific. So and we have Facebook groups now.
Right.
Nothing stays silent anymore.
Yeah.
Anything that happens somewhere, it's going to pop up in one of the groups online. And yeah, I think it's had a really, it's okay now, but I think at the time it had a significant impact on the Australian industry for sure, because there were a lot of people that were going down that route.
Predominantly because of the financial side of it, because it was less expensive.
So. And I think this is the issue that we have with surrogacy. There's so much information out there, and it's all about trust. You're placing your trust in so many different service providers. And if the thing is that there's Australians that work for these clinics and agencies globally in Ukraine, in Greece, in Mexico, in Colombia. And if someone's a good kind of salesperson, or if someone has actually had that lived experience, that's what people are drawn to. And I believe in that Greece situation, there was someone in Australia who was representing the clinic, and that person had a great experience. So he can only talk about their experience.
Right.
But I think that really you need to dive deeper into the legislation, the safety, and there is no other place like the US that has that solid legislative framework. And that's ultimately what inspired me to move my whole life to the US. Because if I can get in first with someone and educate them, it's not even about if they sign with me. If I can get in there from the onset and just educate them on the surrogacy landscape, not just in America, but globally, then that's okay for me.
And that's you've hit the nail on the head with exactly what we're doing in this podcast. Is we're empowering people to make the decisions that are right for them, not the decisions that are right for anybody else.
Exactly.
You can only do that if you just, as you said, you've got the information of the landscape.
Absolutely.
And I think that really impacts a lot of people. And we've had lots of DMs from people asking us, okay, what about this? What about that? And you go in and you talk to people about what your options are. And I think that's so important. So on the back of all of that, you now obviously run this American agency here. How do you talk to your Australian patients about working with Australia? Because it's a long way away, right? Time zone wise, sitting on a plane, like how does all of that work? And also, how do you bring your experience into it from a dad perspective?
For me, having that experience in Thailand and India, and going through that, and I don't want to say it was a waste of time because I learned a lot from that experience, but I think that what I bring is that lived experience. I've been through it. All the joys, and look, this is an emotional roller coaster for anyone that's undertaking this. And I think that if you can do surrogacy in America, you are setting yourself up for securities. And we have just, with that solid legislative framework, it is just a much safer and secure place. And I think that is the message that I give to the Australians. And I think what you're saying about this podcast as well, it's all about education. And that's what we do at NewGen Families, or what I do. I'm the first point of contact. I won't let that go. I love, even though I run the company, I need to meet all of the intended parents. And we're not a massive agency. We're definitely a boutique family-esque agency. But I think it's just focusing on that education and teaching them about the 6 key services, which is the agency, the clinic side, the legal side, the financial management escrow side, insurances, and what I love now, the new one in mental health. And it's really just about drawing from my own personal experiences and applying that to all of the future parents that I meet, not just in Australia, but globally, because initially the idea was to create a really safe space for Australians. That is why I moved to America, because I thought we could survive on just the Australian clientele. But then slowly people learned that we didn't have a waiting list to be matched, or we had a small waiting list, 0 to 3 months, basically, to be matched with surrogates. And then clinics started referring their other international and domestic patients to us. But I think at the end of the day, it's exactly what you guys are doing. This is about education and really trying to get to these people first.
Yeah.
As opposed to going down nightly rabbit holes of researching surrogacy.
Which is exactly what most people do. I remember doing that, researching, sitting, and then before you know it, it's 3 a.m. You've spent 3 hours scrolling through different things. And it's that, I think the pendulum has gone from minimal information to almost too much information.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It really is. There's just too much information there. And you don't know what Google ads are going to pop up as opposed to organic searches. And you can stumble upon anything when you there's a couple of agencies though that have been around for a while that definitely have all the keyword rankings, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, or 3. But hey, and that's essentially in the end why I chose the agency I chose, because I think even 7 years ago, there was still so much information, and there were a couple of agencies that just kept popping up. And so that's why I chose them in the end, because it was that trust thing. The times have changed now, and we've seen so many new agencies pop up, including ours, over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. It's definitely become a space where, people are confident enough to set up their own surrogacy agencies.
But it's a very interesting question there is, how would you, if you were now looking at this to start again, how would you choose your agency?
Oh, it's a great question. Yeah, I think it's just that trust, I think, really.
But how do you gain that trust?
I think it's an instinct. I think that's it. Because the thing is, it's not just the agency, it's the whole, we talk about, you are, at the end of the day, if you choose the US, responsible for putting at least the 4 key services, that team together. So you have to choose the agency, you have to choose the clinic, you have to choose your attorney, and obviously escrow and financial management. So I think it's trusting all of those key partners, and hopefully those key partners are going to endorse you because they know you as well. You know what I mean? But it's definitely an instinct. But I think people have different criteria as to why they choose an agency. And unfortunately, budget is a lot. And one thing with budget, I'm very cautious when we're talking about finances with our potential clients, is because I think that in America, I'm learning very quickly, if you buy anything in America, what the advertised price is certainly not the checkout price. And there's a culture here in America to always quote what they think, what the minimum is going to be. And that's not everybody. Of course, there's great agencies out there that are transparent, but there are plenty of agencies that are quoting unrealistic quotes, and they're getting their close traction, and they are.
But it's very interesting, because I found that today just in the supermarket. I went to buy, I know, so weird. But I went to buy extra storage for the hard drive, and I'm like, oh, it's $149, and you get to the checkout and it's $175. I'm like, what?
What? Exactly.
I'm like, you've got the money, but no, they then add the sales tax on top.
And there's this, So
I think this and that, and then you should go, that's not what I was expecting.
Yep. And it's also then hard on top of that to then explain that these are just estimated costs. And I think that's another thing. We as an agency, we do an audit on all of our cases every 6 months. So we go back and look at escrow and look at exactly how much they spent. And then we'll update our price cost sheet accordingly. And an example, because I know, of course, I've got cost sheets from my competitors. And so I know this. A little thing like travel and meals. We budget for $5,800. Now it's an estimated cost, but I've seen some of my competitors put $1,000 on, and I'm like, your surrogate has to travel to medical screening and then has to travel to the transfer. Now, at medical screening, she's on her own. At transfer, she has a companion. I don't know how many flights, if you have an East Coast surrogate with a West Coast clinic, how on earth are you going to get across the line with $1,000?
So as a parent, I would be paying for her to travel to the screenings and any associated
costs. So travel, accommodation, and then lost wages as well. That's for medical screening. But then there's the 2 trips that the surrogate will do at a clinic will be medical screening, and then obviously for the transfer. So it baffles me as to how
that could be $1,000,
especially right now with inflation. Yeah, there's that. We pride ourselves on transparency, and especially with the costs in every line item that we have. And we would hope, like in my situation, I was very lucky that we got pregnant first go, and so I had money left over in escrow, and that's what we want as well. And it's really talking about the costs. It's a tough one because I could maybe quote $20,000 less in the best case scenario, but no, I'm very happy with that decision of being transparent.
Okay, great. So you're paying, one is going to pay for the medical screening, and the one's going to pay for the transfer, right? So those are the two different journeys. So if an intended parent comes in to you and wants to talk through the budget, right? As we know, it's a lot of money to do this. How does that work with being transparent? Because I come in, I'm gay couple, hey, let's have a baby, or I'm a heterosexual couple, I've been through hell and back, I've spent all this money already. They come in and it's going to cost $200,000 and there's sticker shock right there.
Yep.
How do you explain it to people so that they're not, first of all, falling over with shock, but also walking away with a realistic expectation of what it's going to cost them?
Yeah, good question. I think we prefer to, it's not even prefer, like most of the clients that I consult with, they've got an understanding of the costs. I think people now are doing due diligence online before they're actually then setting up meetings with agencies. So I think that it's only on the odd occasion that we do get the shock of, oh, okay, great. And then it's pretty much an instant if that's a completely unrealistic price, it's so sad because you can see their whole demeanor change and back to square one again.
And that's really tough when you see that demeanor change, when it's almost like the color drains from their face.
Yep.
Like me, you got pregnant first go. Very lucky. And you said that you had money left over in escrow,
yes,
which was, again, very lucky. Tell me more about two things. I've got a question. One is like, why is there not a fixed price? Why can you not just go to an agency and say, this is what it's going to be? And two, again, coming back to that, how do you explain it to your patients with patients, clients? These are the steps.
Yeah. Look, I think very simple answer. This industry is not regulated. It's not federally regulated. It's not state regulated. We have clinics and agencies and attorneys that provide identical services, and the price fluctuates, and it fluctuates a lot. As so I think that's why there's no fixed pricing, because at the end of the day, I suppose they're businesses, and I think that the costs could significantly come down if they adopted the international and more affordable destinations where they hold everything under the one umbrella, like a one-stop shop where the clinic owns the agency and there's a lawyer in-house and there's escrow in-house and then there's insurance in-house and then there's mental professionals. When you do a one-stop shop, which is what I suppose those international destinations do, but here in America, it's deemed an absolute complete conflict of interest. And so you've got separate entities that all come at a cost. And so I think that's why the costs are quite high in America. The real price, look, I think pricing obviously it's a massive pain point in our industry, but I think the only way that we can be as transparent as possible is what I explained before, is that these are estimates. And I think that this should be a question that people ask their agency. If these are estimated costs, how did you come about this estimation? And so we, as I said to you before, we audit every journey that's finished. And that's what our prices are based on. And of course, like we have Art Risk, who we work with Art Risk for our surrogacy insurance solutions. And we get what their averages are for every year. So for 2023, I think, don't quote me, but I think it's about 18,000 or 19,000 was for surrogate friendly insurance purchased during open enrollment, for example. So that'll be a line item on ours as an estimated cost for 18,000. It could be less. There could be surrogates that come in with their own surrogate-friendly insurance. So these really are case-by-case itemized line items that, and as I said to you before, with the travel, we allocate a lot of money for travel. But if we match a Californian couple with a Californian surrogate and they're working with a Californian clinic, they're obviously not going to spend all of that money. So these prices are really case-by-case. But I think what we have a duty to do is to really go through line by line and explain in these situations best and worst case scenarios. Yeah, but that there are so many costs incurred just from our side, from the surrogate side. And once again, we actually take an additional $10,000 for what we call unknown costs that can occur at the end of the pregnancy. What if there's a C-section? And that's not a lot to take up front, but we take a little bit up front because if there's a C-section or doctor ordered bed rest for something throughout the pregnancy. So there are a lot of unknowns. And I think that is the key, is to, of course, they're going to be shocked because they have no idea what they're getting themselves in for, and they don't know how much they're going to be paying. But as long as we can educate them on the best and worst case scenarios, and as we go through the milestones, of course, they have full access to their escrow. So they're going to see exactly what this is. I think as an agency, we have the best case managers, and like, they keep me on my toes. I don't know. I think they must touch type, because the messages that they send our parents, our future parents, it's so detailed in what's coming up. And I think that's also, communication is key.
Yeah.
No shocks. And also our pricing. And this is another question, a great question to ask an agency, or will these prices that you're quoting get me through multiple transfers, or is this for one or two? We confidently say that will definitely get you through one transfer, or it should get you through one transfer, if not two. And so if you achieve a live birth after two transfers, these quotes, this should be good for two. And then anything after that, if there was, just say if we get to transfer number 3, then we already are calculating what the last two transfers would have cost. And we're basically sending an email and communicating earlier on to say, hey, we're predicting that towards the end of your journey, you're going to fall below the minimum required amount in escrow, and you probably need to top it up X amount. So we're not giving them 2 days notice. We're giving them months and months notice to say, okay, you're probably at this point going to need more.
And what's going to happen if they don't have the money?
Look, it's unfortunate. And that's another side to the business that we as a business now accept and tolerate. Unfortunately, we've had cases where people haven't funded escrow and we've had to pay. And that's just part of business.
So they've spent all of their cash and you've stepped in to top it up.
We've stepped in to top it up.
Because that's one of my biggest questions that I receive is, okay, you've told me it's going to be $200,000. What if it's 210? Where am I supposed to get this extra money?
Exactly. And I think that's what we try and educate our clients on as well. When they come in saying, oh, we've got the maximum of this, we're like, you need to also have as a backup, because at the end of the day, what normally happens if people run out of money, it's always the delivery costs and all of the costs that are associated and that are in the surrogate's name. And that's why we step in. If the bills are in their name, hey, it's on them. But that's the unfortunate thing with these situations in surrogacy as agency owners, is that, and full transparency, of course we require escrow to be fully funded upfront. But in some cases, the costs will blow out from what we originally quoted because of these failed transfers or whatever. And yeah, it's unfortunate. And there's that's the sad thing. There's two kinds of parents. There are some parents that are affected by this, and we can do temporary loans or whatever, and they're going to pay us back. But we've also been ghosted by a couple of clients as well. And we know we're never going to get that money back, which is fine. It's totally fine. We're happy that they have a baby. But yeah, we deal with that as an agency. Absolutely.
Because that's one of the biggest fears, right? For every parent is, I'm going to run out of money. And then to your point of, I remember my surrogate received a bill from the hospital 8 months after the birth of the children saying, you owe us X amount of money because the agency we used hadn't done what they were supposed to do with regard to all of the bills and the insurance and and that was in her name.
And that's horrible.
And then she called me in a tizzy going, I've just received a bill for $8,000. What am I supposed to do? Yeah. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, we paid it because it was, there's nothing to do with her.
You're right. Absolutely.
She gets this bill, we pay it. But what I'd love to hear from you a little bit is $200,000. What is the breakdown of that, right?
Yes.
And when is it paid?
Yeah, really good question. Okay, so I'll just start with our costs. So as an agency, that our role is to match with a surrogate and to ultimately, I talk about us being the glue to the journey. Like, we are involved from the beginning to the end and beyond. And as as our clients move through the various milestones, then the other services will pop in and out, but we're really there for the whole time. And so our costs right now at 140,000, and that's broken down. Our agency fee is 40,000. And then once again, it's these estimated costs. So then we allocate $90,000 for the estimated costs, and that's attributed to the surrogate. So that is the surrogate's base compensation. So the average base compensation today is around 45 to 50,000. And that base compensation is broken into 10 payments, starting at confirmation of heartbeat. So the surrogate is only compensated for her base compensation once there's confirmation of heartbeat. So over 10 payments over the pregnancy and after. And that's, half right there. And then, there are things now, I would prefer, I suppose, certain things to be grouped into that base compensation. Look, I'm absolutely pro surrogate. I am pro intended parent, and I'm 50-50. Like, I'm just pro both sides. But I think that potentially there could be some changes made to the benefits packages that we're seeing. So what's
a benefits package?
So a benefits package is basically all the costs attributed to the surrogate and the benefits that she receives. And there are things like what have crept in over the last few years, things like a medical clearance bonus. So once she is passed and she's medically cleared, then she gets a bonus of, let's say, $3,000. I'd prefer if that went into the base compensation.
So base compensation is we're going to pay you $50,000 to carry our baby.
That's it. Yeah.
And then the benefits are you're going to get X for this, X for that.
And there are
that
add-ons.
50 could...
It absolutely goes up.
So why don't you just say everything's included and you're going to get $75,000?
Yeah, look, I've heard lately there are some agencies that are doing that they're presenting these benefits packages and at a fixed price in a sense, and then whatever happens, then
they're on the hook for that.
Exactly, but they can potentially make money from that. So that's when I was like, "Oh, I'm
but wouldn't
not
that
sure.
be from an if it were me coming into this, I'd be like, here's my
money, thank you." Yeah,
whether you make 5, I lose 5. Like, I'm done with my bit.
There's pros and cons for both, but I think the trends are. We're trying to follow the trends and not be so inventive at the moment. But there's
Damien Chambers not being inventive. I'm like, are you the friend I know you are?
Yeah, no, I don't want to say the new kids on the block.
The new gen on the block.
The new gen on the block. There you go. Or Jenny from the block. Yeah, there you go. So there's all of these bonuses that the surrogates receive, as they should. I think it would be possibly better. From my perspective, it's all about the intended parents. And I think that if that was all grouped into one, as opposed to seeing the breakdowns, that might be
easier to comprehend.
Because it's so overwhelming. Yeah. It's overwhelming for me when I do my follow-ups because it's a case-by-case scenario. So we're constantly...
So to bring it back, you've got your agency fee.
Yep.
You've got your...
known costs.
Surrogacy base compensation.
Plus the
benefits. Legal fees.
Yeah, but then in that benefits packages, we allocate $10,000 as well for unknown costs.
A contingency.
Exactly. And then, then legal fees, we quote between $10,000 and $20,000 for that. And of course, clinic fees, it's a case by case. You might already have embryos from another country and are shipping them or whatever. But if it's, let's say, a same-sex male couple that want to create embryos using the same egg donor, there are packages out there that start at $45,000 that can go up to $100,000 if you are going to be very selective on an egg donor. And that's another conversation for those sort of above average costs. And then escrow around the 2,000 mark for escrow and financial management. So they're the 4 ones that are really the bulk of the costs.
And then insurance, which you touched on as well.
Yeah, exactly. So,
that totals up to about 200.
Exactly. And those insurances costs, they're included in our price. So we include the insurance costs, health insurance for the surrogate, life insurance for the surrogate, but
while she's pregnant?
Yes.
And after she's pregnant?
Absolutely. So those insurances we allocate, I think it's like $18,000 as I said for surrogate friendly insurance during open enrollment. That's not a Lloyd's of London policy, which is a gap policy purchased outside of open enrollment. That's another conversation or not.
I can't.
Health insurance in the USA. Yay.
I'm actually trying to do the maths in my head. You've done 40 here, 50 there, 50 there.
I'll break it down again. I'm like 140 for the agency.
But when you say 140 for the agency, that's not the agency fee.
No, 140,000 for the costs that you'll have to pay NewGen.
Okay.
And I'll go back and just say that half of that, 70,000 is due at surrogate match. So we are one of the lucky agencies that doesn't have a lengthy waiting list. So our policy is we don't actually formalize our relationship with any of our clients until they're matched. We don't want that pressure of...
And a match is, hey, I like you as a surrogate, or hey, I've signed with a surrogate.
It's more that we've just done a match. So we've done a match meeting. And then when both parties say, yep, we want to proceed, that's when we formalize the relationship.
Okay.
And so from there, our agency fee is 40, but the overall fees that for us as an agency are 140,000, and 70,000 is due at surrogate match. And then after surrogate match, there's medical screening for the surrogate and then the GCA negotiations. And once the GCA has been signed, gestational carrier agreement. Yes, lots of acronyms in this industry. Yes, so the gestational carrier agreement, once that's been signed by both parties, then before the surrogate starts her medication in preparation for the embryo transfer, we require escrow to be fully funded. And
so the other 70,000.
The other 70,000. And that 70,000, that 140,000 of our costs is based on a $45,000 base compensation for surrogate.
Okay.
And in California, for example, or an experienced surrogate or a Californian surrogate, they can definitely be from sort of 50, 55,000 up. So then obviously if we're going to match you with a surrogate at that base compensation, then you'll have to pay more money. Exactly.
Okay. Because the clinic fees are paid up front as well, right? So basically what you're saying is all of the money for the entire journey has to be in an account somewhere, out of my bank account, in somebody else's bank account before she starts medications.
Absolutely. We have a fiduciary duty to our surrogates to ensure that we are collecting this money. And I think what we've learned over the last couple of years, look, initially we weren't, but we've had to do this because of there's a recession going on globally. We understand that financial positions can change, and we're extremely sympathetic to that. Yeah, we just had to make that rule. And that was the same with me when I did my journey. I had to pay all my money up front, I believe, or it was definitely before embryo transfer. So it's not really changed. But sometimes you get pushback from clients like, oh, and we're like, unfortunately not. You really need that money there. And we do. We owe it to our surrogates to ensure that the money that they're going to be compensated is safe and secure in an account.
Yeah. I love that. I think ultimately everything that we want people to understand and to learn is that they are covered. It's safe and secure legally, financially, psychologically, emotionally. Like everything is to protect all of the people within this industry.
Yeah.
So,
and at the end of the day, I think it's the child that is the one who we're protecting.
Yeah.
That's what we always have to think about. We always have to think what is in the best interest of that child that is being created.
So I know we keep on going and going, but I'm actually going to ask you one last question that we get asked a lot. And it's, is there any one thing that you wish people coming to you would know in advance so that we, as IVF daddies, are able to educate people a little bit?
Yes. I think that there might be a stigma associated with the commercialization of surrogacy. And I think that I wish intended parents knew that surrogates are equally concerned about the families that they're being matched with. We are an altruistically motivated agency, if you can say that. Any surrogate that signs with NewGen Families, we ask a question: why do you want to become a surrogate? And we only accept one response that they lead with. They have to lead with altruistic motivation. They have to want to help another family. There is some kind of fear that surrogates want to keep a baby, and it's all around the surrogate because this is the human being that's going to carry their child. So understandably, there's a lot of paranoia out there. And I think that if intended parents could understand that my surrogate, for example, works for NewGen, we have the most incredible relationship, and all of our matches that we do at NewGen, they're beautiful. There's so much love in this. And to debunk this myth about surrogates wanting to keep babies or that they're doing them for commercial reasons, that's just not it at all. And I think that also our surrogates undergo such an intense psychological screening process, social screening process, medical screening process. And all of our intended parents have to do is pass a criminal background check. And they'll have a joint journey preparation session with a mental health professional, which is one of the new SEED standards, which we've rolled out. And a shout out to Embra Health, by the way, who are now our new mental health partners. But I think that is it. I think it would be educating them, because there's so much fear sometimes, and some of the questions that we get, we understand that. But yeah, surrogates are amazing human beings. And I feel like I'm forever in debt to my surrogate. There's nothing I feel like I can do in my lifetime. My life has purpose now. I have a beautiful son through surrogacy, and the surrogates that facilitate this and help us grow our families, I think they need to be celebrated more. So that's
beautiful. And they do. And to any surrogate who's listening to this, you make dreams come true.
Absolutely. And we love you.
And we're forever in debt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I love how we finished on that.
Boom.
Yay.
Thank you so much for listening. We will be back soon, so talk to you soon.